Before we start our period and closing process, we want to make sure of three things. We want to make sure that we're in the right environment. We want to make sure that our test database reflects the most current version of production database, and also that we've taken a backup before we start. The latter of the two will need to be verified either using the SLD or using the consensus support team. And to do this, we'd like to send an email to support@consensusintl.com. And then to ensure that we're in the right database, obviously we want to do this in the test database first. We'll go through the hamburger icon, go to administration, and then choose company. Here we'll find our company. I want to do this in the MAR demo, so I'll simply click OK. The reason why we do this in a test environment first is that we want to make sure that we're not adding any irreversible transactions to the production environment. The production environment is obviously the golden copy, and we want to make sure that it remains as clean as possible. Posting periods in SAP Business One can be defined in the administration, system initialization, and then into our posting periods. In the posting periods window, we can see all the current and past posting periods defined in the system. You can also see that there's different statuses for different periods. Because we have this check mark here, automatically update period status to closing period for existing periods, unchecked. This means that the periods do not automatically close, and we don't have to go back through each period and close them whenever we're ready to close the period. So if I wanted to do this and actually change the period status, of course I'd have to have the correct authorizations to do this, but I drill into the period. So we'll go into January 2021. And we'll simply change the period status to closing period or locked. Because we're going to close this period, we'll simply change it to closing period, as we don't want other periods or other users to be changing the period while we're closing or adding transactions while we're closing the period. So here we'll change it to closing period, simply update the posting period, and it will reflect in the period status column. We can automatically update this posting period status for each posting period by simply clicking the automatically update period status. And then we can set the day in which we want the period status to be closed. So here, if I want it on the first day, I can just simply leave it as 1 and then update it. Once I open up the posting periods window again, these will be reflected as closing periods rather than unlocked. Here we also have the create new periods with the due date to in next financial year. This is almost like the one below it, where we can set the due date of each period to be of the next year, ended in December, or a different month. If we want to add a new period, we can simply click the new period in the bottom right hand corner of the posting periods menu. And then we'll start by adding 2022. So for our period code, we'll just use 2022. Period name, we use 2022 as well. And for this demonstration, I'm just going to add the next year as a normal calendar year. So we'll have months. We can also have years, quarters, and days, depending on the periods that you'll be reporting. So for this demonstration, like I said, we'll use months. By default, the period status will be set to unlocked. And then here we can make sure that the period posting date from means the start of the period will begin on January 1st, 2022. Here in the due date, you'll see that the due date 2 will be the following year from the start of the period. The reason this is just so different clients might have different payment terms, such as net 30, net 60, or net 90. This means that payments can be submitted up to 30, 60, or 90 days after the last day in the period. This is important, so we make sure that we're receiving payments this period in the next year if the customer pays it after the period is closed. We also have the document date, which is when documents will be used in this period. Here we have the start of the fiscal year and the fiscal year name. These will come into play whenever we do sort of different periods. If your fiscal year starts on the 4th, in March of the year, or if it's doing a special period like 544. So here we'll add the new posting periods. And as you can see, 2022 also adds each month to the posting period, so it's not just one month. And then we can simply update the posting periods menu to add the rest of the posting periods. For different posting periods, such as a offset financial year or a special year like 544, we can do the same thing. Create a new period. For this one, we'll just call it test. We'll also have 12 periods, so we'll select the months of subperiods. Here, I'd like to start this on April of 2023, so we'll do 4/1, 2023. And this will automatically update the posting date. So the posting date will now have to be updated to reflect the start of the fiscal year. And then whenever we add it, it will go from the first period, which is 4/1, all the way down to March of 2024. In the same way that we started our period ending process, we want to make sure that for a year on in specific, we have everything closed out that we possibly can. A good rule of thumb for this, because the year end can get very difficult and there are a lot of transactions, is to simply close your periods at the end of each month or at the end of each quarter, so that you don't have to have any or as many transactions to process at the end of the year. We want to make sure that we're doing 3 things or 4 things in specific. We want to make sure that our period ending transactions are posted properly. We want to make sure any open journal vouchers are posted as journal entries. We'd like to run an inventory audit report and reconcile inventory with our general ledger. And finally, close out any open documents that can be closed. We know that we might be receiving payments at the end of into the next year via certain payment terms per customer, and obviously those things can be left open, but we want to close as many as we possibly can. Once we've completed our period end checklist and we're ready to actually close the periods, we'll go to Administration, Utilities, and Period End Closing. In the Period End Closing window, we can select the accounts we'd like to close out for the period. It's important to note that SAP will not require you to close a period, and it will only allow you to close the period whenever you're ready and you've made all the required adjustments. Here we can select the period we'd like to close out. Since the first period is already closed, it does not display in 2020. So here we can close out February through December, or we can do it month by month if we so choose. Here we'll select the 2 accounts that we'll be posting to. The retained earnings account and period and closing account are both equity accounts. The retained earnings account is already populated, so we'll go ahead and select the period and closing account. Once we've selected all the P&L accounts that we'd like to use, here I'll close out all of them. We can simply execute. And this will display all of the accounts that will be affected by the period end closing. So first we'll need to add a due date. For the sake of this demonstration, we'll use 12/31/20. And we'll select all the accounts that we'd like to close out. So here we'll close out all of it for the year. Using the Shift key, select all the boxes. And we'll simply click Execute. And add our document date. This will close out all of the accounts. To ensure that we've got that we posted all of the period and closing accounts, we'll go to our financials, and we'll go to our journal entries, and then we can go to find mode. Since we posted these journal entries with the due date of 12/31/20, I can simply add the date, find, and we'll scroll all the way down to the bottom to see the journal remarks for the period closing 171, which is the document that we just created. So here we'll open it up, and here we can see the accounts that were affected from the period closing. Once we go through and actually close the periods, we'll want to make sure that we go back into the posting periods and lock the posting periods. To do this, we'll go back to our posting period screen, administration, system initialization, and then posting periods. Since we just closed the 2020 periods, we're going to want to make sure that each of the periods are reflected as a locked period status. So we'll simply go into the period and lock the period. Here we can update it, click OK, and the period status will be updated. This just makes sure that no other documents can be added to the posting period. After we have set the periods to locked, we also want to make sure that what we did was right in the period and closing process. So to do this, we'd like to verify by printing the trial balance, the vendor liabilities and aging, vendor's liability aging and customer receivable aging, and any and all financial statements that we might have.